described memes as being a form of cultural propagation, which is a way for people to transmit social memories and cultural ideas to one another. There's a meme floating around these days that says, "I can't adult today." Now that expression has been stenciled on t-shirts, it's been laminated on paper, it's found its way on coffee cups. I can't adult today. Now that sounds clumsy with its unconventional use of the word adult as a verb, but it's not hard to get at what the saying really means, which is, at the moment, I am incapable of being a responsible grown-up. I think we've all felt that way at times. Sometimes we just want to hit the pause button on the duties of being an adult. A blogger who is also a pastor and writer referred to this not long ago in a blog post entitled, "I Can't Christian Today." Only in this case, he wasn't trying to be funny or sardonic. After declaring, "I can't Christian today," he added, quote, "I can no longer be tethered to this thing that is so toxic and so painful to so many. I can't wade through any more bad theology and predatory behavior from pulpit-pounding pastors who seem solely burdened to exclude and to wound and to do harm. I can't sift through all this malice and bitterness masquerading as Christianity to try and find out what of it is left that's worth keeping." End quote. Wow. He continued in that tone, and it quickly became apparent that he has had his fill of people who are Christian in name, but weren't, in his view, demonstrating the love of Jesus in their actions. He wondered if Christianity is helpful anymore. You know, it's easy these days to see the us versus them mentality to which he alludes. It surfaces in most denominations these days as followers of Jesus squabble over what serving him should look like and how the Bible should be applied. The them may be evangelicals generally labeled as conservative and reactionary, and the us, on the other hand, progressives who generally have more liberal views, or vice versa. With such rabid partisanship on play today, it's not surprising that some would endorse the conclusion the blogger suggests and agree that today it's just not helpful for followers of Jesus to identify themselves as Christian. The Apostle Paul disagrees. Respectfully, of course. The Apostle Paul had no such reservations. He too was distressed with the behavior of some who called themselves Christians. Against these people, Paul minced no words. We read, "Keep an eye on those who cause dissensions and offenses in opposition to the teaching that you have learned. Avoid them. For such people do not serve our Lord Christ, but their own appetites, and by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the hearts of the simple-minded." That's out of Romans 16. These troublemakers were probably those who argued that Christians, whether Gentile or Jew, Christians must observe Jewish religious customs, including circumcision. But Paul countered such thing. And so, of course, he didn't like that some other Christians argued otherwise. Nonetheless, despite how Paul felt about those he was convinced misapplied the gospel, he freely and he gladly identified himself as a follower of Jesus. To the Philippians he wrote, "It is my eager expectation and hope that I will be not put to shame in any way, but that by my speaking with all boldness, Christ will be exalted now as always in my body, whether by life or by death. For me living is Christ, and dying is gain." It's impossible to imagine Paul getting up one morning and simply declaring, "I can't Christian today." I just don't see it. And then there's our text this morning, which the New Testament identifies as from Paul in a letter being written to Timothy, in which Paul, apparently sensing the end of his life, wrote, "I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." He got to this place in his thinking by getting up every day, day in, day out, with the attitude that he could serve Christ that day. He's facing death. And not death by natural causes. Yet he's still able to say, "Hey, another day to be a Christian. I can Christian today." Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it is hard. What about us? Do we ever get so troubled by how some people behave in the name of Christ, be they church professionals or ordinary people, that we don't want outsiders to think these people represent what Christian means? Every time I see a protest by Westboro Baptist Church, or hear of clergy misconduct in the larger church, it breaks my heart. How do we feel when political figures wanting our votes declare themselves to be Christians while espousing ideas that are far afield from what Christ would advocate? Today, Christians are splintered into many divisions and factions. Not only are we divided into numerous denominational camps, we're divided by various and assorted political and cultural boundaries. And for many, these boundaries are far more important than the denominational and doctrinal ones. Whatever position we take on immigration policy, a border wall, same-sex marriage, presidential politics, Supreme Court nominations, abortion, welfare, legalization of marijuana, some Christians will immediately call into question our relationship with Jesus Christ. Hear this again. Whatever position we take. When this happens, some might say, well, if that's what it means to be a Christian, I want no part of it. Or they might simply say, I'm done. I can't Christian today. And when we say this, of course we immediately become one of the partisans that we scorn. But let's let's take a clue from how that odd phrasing uses Christian as though it were a verb. While in standard usage, Christian is normally a noun or an adjective, in practice, it's a verb. A word that is used to describe an action. The truth is that while there are millions of Christians who don't want to be associated with Christians of questionable views, politics, or practices, those same millions are out there nonetheless Christianing day after day, serving God faithfully in our troubled world. They are building hospitals and schools. They are developing programs to lift the poor and help the needy. They are helping out at the local church. They're working with Pakistani refugees, helping them get housing and to learn English. They're counseling low-functioning adults. They're tutoring teens who now need help with academics. They are delivering meals to the elderly. They are working in summer camps for foster kids. They aren't going to let their work be derailed